The public transport system in France is a rather interesting aspect of French culture. Indeed, it's hard for one to understand the many differences in public transport between the United States and its oldest ally, France, until one has seen both systems. I've heard stories of Frenchmen who spend time in the United States and are surprised that they cannot take a train from St. Petersburg to Atlanta or from Los Angeles to New York. While on the flip side, it's much easier to get around in France without a car, as my host family realized.
There are several possible explanations of why the public transport system in France is so much more advanced than its American counterpart. Perhaps the most obvious one is that France is a much denser country, with smaller streets and more people living in each square mile. 295 in France versus 85 in the US per square mile. With the invention of the automobile in the United States, we naturally made wider roads and created cities much more spread out compared to France. The tram systems could fit down the same streets that horse-drawn carriages used to go down. The towns in France are much more condensed. As we learned in the historical part of town, it used to be surrounded by massive walls. This means that every shop and residence of value was trying to fit into those walls. The ease of transportation without a vehicle was pleasantly surprising. We could easily travel from one side of town to the other in about 30 minutes. If you live way out on a corner, the commute is longer but is still very simple and easy. You go get on a tram and ride into town. That was part of the beauty of the system, is that if you need to go anywhere, you can buy tickets one at a time, you can buy 10 rides, 1 week, or even yearly passes. It's cheaper than owning a car, and with small streets and limited parking, the tram system works well for France.
In France, there are quote unquote tobacco stores, which are denoted by signs that are rhombuses elongated on the vertical axis that are red. They're very noticeable, and any tobacco will be able to sell train tickets along with other pharmaceutical items.
There are strict fines for attempting to board a tram without a valid ticket, which our unfortunate friends Manny and Shannon found out. In both cases, they had tickets and were willing to use them. However, they had not used them correctly and caught by the men policing the trams. They were made to get off the tram and pay 50 euros. This is their way of reinforcing the use of tram tickets and reducing free riding on the trams in France. Of course, the United States does have a public transport system, but it isn't as nice as the transport system in France. Some could argue that the discrepancy has been caused by a lack of funding by the US government, but there is also a rather gaping lack of public interest and support for public transport in the United States.
On top of having a tram system that is beautifully integrated into the ancient and modern cityscape of France, the trams themselves are incredibly well kept compared to their American counterparts. For example, the Boston subway system, affectionately known as the T, is an unintuitive, dirty, and very loud transport system, while the French trams are surprisingly clean, smooth, and easy to figure out, even for those who do not speak the language.
As well as having an advanced network of intra-city public transport, France has the famous TGV. This inner-city public transport system, which goes to nearly every city in France and many cities in the European Union, is renowned and known for its extremely high speed. During commercial use, it reaches speeds up to 300 kilometers an hour and is almost as efficient, if not more efficient, than airline travel. This is another great option for transportation while in France.